Howdy folks, and welcome to this video on using Bootstrap components for fetching and rendering data. In this video, I'll take you through making a simple app with a couple of the Bootstrap components that they offer on their website. And then we'll tweak those components just a little bit so that we can use them for our own custom functionality, which will involve fetching a little bit of data and rendering a little bit of the response from that fetch request. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so I'm starting off with an HTML file. And if you watched my previous video on Bootstrap Basics, you'll remember that in order to use the Bootstrap CSS functionality, we have to incorporate this link tag that can be easily found on the Bootstrap website under the Getting Started portion of the docs. We're also going to use Bootstrap's JavaScript functionality. So I've gone ahead and added their script tag as well down here at the bottom of the body. And then right before that, I have another script tag linking my personal JavaScript file, which we will get into later in this video. So for this example, I thought that it would be fun if we allowed the user to type in a search term, and then that search term gets used for a fetch request to the Giphy API. And then we would render the first result that we get back from Giphy into a card, which will also be a Bootstrap component. And then for a third component, I thought we would use a dismissible alert that would pop up if, say, we didn't get any results back from our fetch request. We could have a dismissible alert pop up, and you can click it and close it, and that will actually use the JavaScript here built by Bootstrap. So let's just start by throwing some components onto our page. We'll start with the search term input. So we'll head to the browser. Here's our page so far, nothing on it. And if we look under forms and just go to overview, I see these here. Okay, I know I want a submit button. I know I only want one input. I don't want this check me out. I don't want it to say password, and I don't want it to be a password type. I want to see what I'm typing. But nonetheless, I can still use this and modify it. So I'll just copy this. It's all being contained within a form. That's perfect. And I'll go ahead and add that form to the body of my project. Okay, so I know that I only want one input. So I'll go ahead and delete one of them. I know that I don't want it to be of type password. So I want it to be of type text. So I'm changing the type on the input. I know that the label should say something like enter Giphy search term. Okay, that looks good. And then I don't want the checkbox or the label associated with it. Perfect. And then the button, I think, looks good. It's of type submit. That's what I want. I want it to submit this form. So that's good. Now, I also know that I'm going to be handling a submit event for this form in my JavaScript, and therefore I know I'll need an ID for this form. So I'm going to go ahead and add it now. So we'll call it ID search form. I know that I'll also need an ID specifically for the input so that I can access what the user has typed in. So I'll go ahead and add an ID here, and we'll call this, oops, ID equals search input. Okay, let's see how that looks so far. Looks great. Okay. Now I want a card that will display the image that we get in our results. So back to the Bootstrap website, head down to components, and I see card here. And I like the first one that I see. It's got a space for an image. It's got a button. Maybe we can use that as like a link to Giphy, to the specific GIF on Giphy. So we'll go ahead and grab that card and we'll put it right below the form. Always have to fix the indentation when copying and pasting. I know that in this card, I will definitely need to have an ID for the image element because I'm going to be changing the source attribute. We'll make that blank for now. So I'll go ahead and give this an ID of, we'll keep it simple and call it image. Okay. And I guess we will also need an ID for the anchor tag here. So, and we'll just call it link. You know, not very descriptive, but we're just trying to keep it simple and easy to remember. Let's see how that looks. Not bad. The image, of course, isn't loading because there's no source specified. Maybe I want that a little wider. They've styled it just using inline styling here. We'll just go ahead and double that. Or actually, that would be 36, wouldn't it? That looks good. Yeah, good enough. And I wanted a dismissible alert. Let's go ahead and add that to our page so we can see it. So we'll go back to Bootstrap. Under components, there are alerts. And I happen to know that the dismissible ones are a little ways down here. Here we go. So I'll just copy that and add it below this div. Fix the indentation. And I want this alert to pop up in the event that there were no, oh wait, that's the class name, silly me. We wanted to change what the user is actually seeing here. There were no results found. Okay. And let's, verify that the JavaScript's working by clicking on the X button. Sure enough, it disappears. If I reload it, it comes back. Okay, so we have the components of our page. It's time to start using a little bit of JavaScript to make these things functional. Okay, so I just remembered that a couple more IDs do need to be added to the HTML. One is the div that's holding the card. I want to be able to dynamically hide and show that card. So I'm going to give it an ID, and we'll call it result, as in the result of our fetch request. And then this alert, the dismissible alert, I want to be able to hide that initially as well. And so I'm going to give it an ID of alert. Okay, on to the JavaScript. So for the sake of not letting this video get too long, I've pre-written the JavaScript that I have in the app, but I'll take you through it line by line. So first off, we have an API key. Most APIs need something like this, some kind of authentication. The Giphy API is free. I just had to log in and create an account, but I didn't need to add a credit card or anything like that. And then they sent me this via email. Nonetheless, I plan on disabling it by the time you're watching this video. So then I went and created variables for some of my elements, including, and I'm sorry about these pop-ups, man, they're really persistent today. I made variables for the search form element, for the results div where the card will be shown and hidden. And I initially hid that card so that the page loads and there's nothing showing below the search bar. I made a variable for the image within the card, and there's the variable for the alert, and I'm initializing its display to none. So then the rest of this code is within the submit event handler for the submit form, search form, excuse me. So I added a submit event listener to the search form, and it executes all of this code when the user submits that form. So first off, we prevent the default, and then we make a variable for what the user typed into the input. I grab that input by its ID and access its value. So now we have a string saved in here. Then it's time for me to build my API URL. I first went to the Giphy API docs, and that's where I got the template for this. And just the basic search, they tell you that all you got to do is put in a search term here as a query parameter. And you do the same thing with your API key. So we have this URL with two query parameters, and we're just using a little bit of concatenation to get the search term that the user puts in, as well as the API key, in order to get one nice valid API URL. Now, this video is not going to go deep into fetching. It's sort of assuming that you understand the basics of fetching. But nonetheless, I'll show you that we indeed initiate a fetch, and then If the response is not okay, we just do some minimal error handling just to see what the status is. But then we go ahead and convert it to JSON, and then we have our data. And so we check to see, is the data.length equal to 0? Like, are we getting an empty array back from our search results from Giphy? If so, we don't want to see that card that's inside of this results element. And we do want to see the alert here, the dismissible alert. But if the response contains at least one GIF, we will go ahead and console log it. We'll go ahead and show the card, and then we'll give the image element inside that card a new source attribute, which is equal to an image URL that I found by parsing through the data. And then I set the link href. So if you may remember, we made an anchor tag here with this button that says go somewhere. And this is inside the card. It has an ID of link. So I'm able to set the href attribute to another piece of data, another URL that's has to be, I have to parse through the data response in order to find where that is. And so I'll take you through how I did that. And then lastly here, there's some error handling in case there was an error inside of this catch block. Okay, let's look at the page here. So if we type in dog, can't go wrong with that. He's just so cute. We get a valid response. That's great. And so here's what it looks like. Inside the code, I'm calling my JSON data, but it has a property called data, and that is this array. That is why I had to say data.data.length. It's a bit verbose, but it is a way of checking to see whether or not we got at least one GIF. So in order to set the source attribute for the image to show that cute dog, I had to go data.data first result. That was just an arbitrary decision to just only return one result, to only render one result. And then I go images, original, WebP. So I, inspected one of these and figured out that there was a valid image inside this original thing. And then I went with WebP. So we're seeing this one. There were a lot of different options there that you could go with as far as which image file to use. I did a similar thing for the link button, which is this button here, the go somewhere button. I set its attribute, its href attribute, to data.data first result.url. So that would be data.data first result, collapse images, .url, and that's a link to the Giphy site itself where that GIF is being hosted. And so, as you can see, I can change the search term to San Diego and get Ron Burgundy. That's great, and the href, of course, changes when I do so. If I type a bunch of gargly goop and get no result, I get my dismissible alert, and I can go ahead and dismiss that and type a new term like hat. That's a good one. I am realizing just now, though, that if I typed gook again, I don't get the alert. I have to reload the page in order for that to happen. So that's something I didn't entirely think all the way through, but at least it works the first time. But there you have it. This is how we would use the stylistic features of Bootstrap in combination with the dynamic features of our JavaScript. So the main takeaway here from this video is that those components that Bootstrap offers on their website don't have to look exactly the way that they do on the website. You can change them, and you can give them IDs in order to access them via your JavaScript, and then you can make them do things dynamically. So those components are mainly just a starting point. And then to demonstrate that dynamic ability, we did a little bit of fetching and rendering and styling from our JavaScript page to make a fun little GIF search app. All right, folks, I hope this is helpful for you, and I wish you all the best coding. Take care, folks.